Welcome to the first episode of the Thinker's Oasis. I'm Petros. I've studied a BA and an MA of philosophy at KU Leuven, and now I'm doing a Master's of Theology and Religious Studies at VU Amsterdam. And
I am Justin. I'm currently still undergrad. I'm a senior at the University of Kentucky, and I'm studying philosophy.
And this is going to be a podcast that has to do with philosophy, theology, and biblical studies, and possibly a bunch of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to have discussions with each other, and we may also bring a few scholars here every once in a while. In fact, we have one scheduled for the 25th of November. I don't know when we will upload that, but that's when we're supposed to record it, at least. So this is it's going to be some sort of introductory episode. It's going to be not as lengthy as others. And we will talk about something, I guess, fundamental to the sort of topics that we're dealing with. First of all, we'll talk about faith. So what exactly is faith? Always from this context of Christianity, theology, philosophy of religion. And then we will also talk a little bit about knowledge. At the beginning, we will say, what are the different types of knowledge? But then we will talk specifically about knowledge of persons, so knowing a person, because that thing is related to faith and it's related to knowing God. So to start with faith, the Greek word for faith in the New Testament is pistis.
You want me to put on the lexical thing on?
Sure, yeah. So typically there is, and sometimes people say that. Should I start from talking about what it is, or should I start about random weird views that atheists have online and then
weird views on the atheists have online? It then come here and look at the lexicon.
All right. So sometimes online, maybe by edgy atheists who have YouTube, TikTok videos, or who write on weird stuff on like Reddit, but maybe even sometimes by the more famous kind of atheists, you will get this idea. What?
Like Richard Dawkins.
Right. You will get this idea that faith means belief without evidence, right? Now, is this really what faith means? Well, if you actually look at the context of the Bible and look at how the word is used in other extra biblical texts, and I'm talking about the text of that time, so the Second Temple period, even, by the way, how it's used today sometimes, both in Greek but also in English by Christians, that's not really what it means. So faith, it just means trust, right? And the fact that you trust somebody or someone, right? That doesn't mean that you have no evidence. That's not part of faith, right? You could trust somebody without having evidence, but you could also trust somebody when you have evidence. So you could trust your doctor because you've been to him a bunch of times and you've perceived him to be reliable or whatever, right? But there's a distinction because sometimes the Greek word for faith, the Greek word is actually pistis, right? That's what's found in the New Testament and probably in the Septuagint as well.
I do want to make a note here, though, where here it does say, on this lexicon entry, does say that in theology could mean faith, belief, as opposed to sight and knowledge. And some people might use that to see it's not rooted in evidence.
Okay.
But just because it's like people say it's opposed to knowledge doesn't mean that it lacks evidence. Because if you see the other, like the people who wrote, like the New Testament authors, use the word beasties because it conveyed the idea they had in mind. And he got this idea from the Septuagint and other like Greek texts.
And but when it is used in the New Testament, does it ever imply that there is no knowledge?
No.
Exactly.
Even like in Hebrews, there's like a passage that even says that like Abraham considered like the possibilities he trusted God that he could like bring back like Isaac from the dead.
Right.
And if you look at the Greek, the word does come from like a word that's related to the word logos, which is reason.
Okay, gotcha. So typically, the word they use is pistis, right? And then there's a distinction between pistis oti and pistis se, right? And that's basically translated as believe that and believe in. So believe that's basically a propositional attitude. It's taking a proposition to be true. So believe that God exists would be that you just have the belief that God exists, right? And then there's believe in, and then that means trust. That's not really propositional attitude, although it probably includes, like if you believe in God, if you trust God, that probably also implies that you do believe that God exists. But in itself, believe in, that's a separate sort of concept from believe that. But typically, what we mean Christians when we say that you have faith to God, we just mean believe in. So we mean that you gotta trust God. So of course, just thinking that He exists, that's not enough. That's not what's the requirement from Scripture. But trusting God, that doesn't really imply that you have no evidence for His existence, or you have no knowledge of His existence, or that you don't know Him as a person, or anything like that. In fact, the disciples of Jesus who knew that He was God, they were still called to have faith in Him, right? Even though they had the evidence, right?
They knew him personally, you know.
Right. So is this enough for faith, or should we? Do you have something else to say?
I have nothing else to say on it. Should we look at the passage in James?
Okay. Yeah, you can say that, yeah. So which verse did it start? In which verse?
9, like verse 19.
So do I read it?
Yeah.
19 to what?
I mean, if we're just gonna talk about like believe in versus, you know.
Okay.
Because like it does say pistevis hotis.
Right. So
You can
you
read.
believe that God is one, you do well. The demons also believe, and they shudder. O ignorant one, will you not recognize that apart from works, faith is dead? Was not our father Abraham justified by works, by offering up his son Isaac on the altar? You can see that his faith was working with his actions, and that by works faith was perfected. That's the scripture which says Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him as righteousness was fulfilled, and he was the friend of God. So, if you look at the Greek version, which is on the left,
Right.
it says right on the right. It says "Si pistevis oti." So pistevo oti, as we mentioned earlier, that's believe that. That's having a propositional attitude. So it basically says you believe that God is one, right? So this is not what we mean with faith, right? This is just having the view that there is one God or whatever, right? That's not implying that you have faith in God. Well, good, but also demons have faith in God, because obviously demons do not have faith in God. They don't trust God. If they did, they wouldn't do what they're doing, right? And it's interesting because sometimes this passage is used to say that salvation doesn't really depend on faith alone. It's faith plus works. I mean, to some extent, this is a distinction that has to do with semantics, whether how you define faith and works. So it's not that important, but at least this sort of passage, it gives you an example of this sort of distinction. Believe that and believe in, right? So do you have something to say?
Not much. I was just gonna like bring up like the one passage from Kallistos Ware.
Okay.
Should we go there? Like, do you think we summed up this section?
Sure, yeah. And which translation is this?
This is the weird. The English translation, it's one made by this one guy, and just call it the Weird Guy's translation.
Right. Okay.
It's
Which
the Eastern/Greek Orthodox New Testament.
exactly. And why do we call him weird? You know, maybe we will say this on a future episode. But we've seen this translation before, and we compared it with the Greek, and we found it to be more accurate in a bunch of passages, especially in the distinction between what's usually these two words are both translated as worship, right?
Latria and proskynesis.
Exactly.
Two words that translates worship, but like they don't have the same meanings. One of them means to like express adoration, and the other one means to serve. And in most English translations, they get lumped in together as worship, and they get arbitrarily translated as such.
And that is a problem if you want to figure out the meaning of the text, because in the original passages, since the two words have two distinct definitions, they mean two different things. So by turning them both into worship, we're kind of missing some of the context, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you gonna bring the Kallistos Ware text?
So speaking from an Orthodox perspective, I will bring this passage from Kallistos Ware, which is from the Orthodox Way, the first chapter of his book called The Orthodox Way. I have it here up on the screen. It says, faith then signifies a personal relationship with God, a relationship as yet incomplete and flattering, yet none the less real. It is to know God not as a theory or an abstract principle, but as a person. To know a person is far more than to know facts about that person. To know a person is essentially to love him or her. There can be no true awareness of other persons without mutual love.
Okay.
So here we see that faith is attached to like knowledge. But he makes it like simple that it's a knowledge of a person. You might ask, like, what's the difference? Like, knowledge of a person isn't like just knowing random facts about like that person. And if you go to like the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they even make a distinction that there's in epistemology, there's three types of knowing. There's knowing individuals, knowing how to do stuff.
There's the propositional knowledge, right?
Knowledge of facts.
Right, just knowing a proposition. So there's a huge debate about what that is. People used to think it's justified through belief, right? And then there are the get your case and all of that, and then there's a discussion about what exactly is the definition of propositional knowledge. But that would just be to just know that something is true, right? And typically truth is a condition of knowledge. Some people disagree. Huge debate. But it's important to note that, as you mentioned earlier, that when we say that we know God, we don't just mean propositionally. So we don't just know a bunch of stuff about God, a bunch of properties that God has, a bunch of, I don't know, biblical passages about God. We have to know him as a person, right? And this brings us to the second type of knowledge, and that's knowing individuals or knowing a person. And there is a passage from the Stanford Encyclopedia title.
And we have it on the screen if you want to like pause and have a read at it.
Right. And then there is the know-how, right? So knowing how to do something. But that won't be that useful for today's episode, but it's just another category of knowledge. It's right below that too. Yeah. So in terms of knowing a person, knowing God, sure, that would also imply you have some kind of propositional knowledge. Since if you know him as a person, that probably means you know something about him. Exactly. But knowing facts about him is not enough. There's something broader going on, right?
Because like I can like know facts about like someone in my class, right? Like I can say, oh yeah, this one person's in my class, they look like this, they talk in this weird way, but that doesn't mean like I know that person as a person.
Exactly.
I tend to think of this in like last semester I took phenomenology, and I tend to think it in the way that like several like speaks, where it's like okay, let me put it this way. I think about grasping someone as they truly are in themselves as like knowledge of the individual, and just knowing mere like facts about someone isn't grasping who they are as they truly
Exactly.
are in themselves.
Because knowing that individual, that would also imply that you have some sort of experience of them to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know some stuff about Obama, right?
Like
I have even
he ate my cereal.
well, I have the experience of watching videos where Obama says stuff, right? But that doesn't mean I know him in person, right?
Even
What
videos, you
what
also get the fact that like with AI, you see like the AI of like Joe Biden playing like Minecraft with Obama and Trump. You get stuff like that, which is like, I mean, like no, like of course we know that like that is like not like real,
right?
but like with videos, it's becoming more and more easy to like fake stuff. So you could know like what you think is a fact about a person, but it turns out to be false or edited.
There is also that. But
Yeah.
even if, let's say, you get the true facts about Obama somehow, right? Does this still mean that you know him as a person?
No, because you don't know like his desires or anything like that. You don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. You don't
Um,
know in the sense that I just said, like you don't know who he is as he truly is in himself.
exactly. So then,
Use
what does
like
it really mean?
phenomenological language.
What does it really mean to know God as a person? Then it would include some propositional stuff, okay? But what about them knowing him as a person, as in what in Stanford they call knowing individuals or whatever?
So in the Orthodox Church, we like take a more Platonic view of this. So here I have a like put up a passage from Father Andrew Loud's book called "The Origins of Christian Mysticism." The origin of the Christian mystical tradition that goes back to some degree to Plato. And here you see that for Plato, knowledge is not like merely knowing like propositional things, but is identity with and participation in that which is known. And then you see this when Socrates talks about like virtue as as knowledge. And then here you have this. You can see that I have highlighted is for Plato, real knowledge is more than intellectual awareness. It implies the orientation of the whole person, so that one participates in the realm of ideas or forms. So how does like one participate in God? In the Orthodox Church, we have this doctrine called the essence, energy, and distinctions. So that is the God's essence is different than his energies. So the way that a person participates in God is by participating in his activity. And like you see this in the New Testament as well. I forget the verse off the top of my head, but like in Colossians, Paul says that like his like since he's working towards like since he's doing God's will by like preaching the gospel, in a sense, his activity and Christ's activity have become one, but they're both distinct from each other. In Bradshaw, it says like Professor Bradshaw comments on this. Again, I'm forgetting it. Like this is off the top of my head.
No, that's okay.
If you couldn't tell, this isn't scripted at all. We're just kind of like
No, it's not.
just
Yeah,
like seeing
and
where this
we
goes.
didn't prepare either.
Yeah,
But in a
just
sense, it feels more real, right?
yeah,
Rather than some kind of a lecture.
yeah. But like he
But
does say, go on.
that's actually interesting. So when he participates in the activities of Jesus, because Jesus is it about the things that Jesus did previously, or does it mean that when he does stuff, Jesus also does stuff?
It's that like it's like what Jesus is currently doing, like he's
Currently
participating
doing.
in that.
So it's not just the work that he did in the sense that he had some disciples and started
Yeah.
sharing that. Okay. So
It-
in a sense, this is God's providence.
Yeah.
It's God directly affecting. Does he affect Paul, and then Paul does something, or is it that he affects the outcome? I guess it could be both, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's like Paul is open, like he has chosen to do like what God wills,
Okay.
and in the sense of that, like that's how he gets drawn, like that's how he affects Paul. It's not like he like preordains Paul to do it.
Right.
In like the Calvinist view, where it's like, or I shouldn't say Calvinist, in like a deterministic way, where it's like, oh, he
We
has
are
to do
super
this, no free
determinism.
will. No, it's like
Right.
the like Paul chooses to do like what Christ wills him to do, and by doing that, like both of their like activities become one. And the way I think about this is like, look at like you see how like my hands are like they look like one, they move like one here, but like you see there's
Right.
it's not, this isn't like a perfect analogy, but it's like
Sure.
an
Yeah.
example. It's something kind of like that.
Right.
And this causes Paul to rejoice.
Okay, that is interesting. So
I could have explained it better, but
also to mention this, um, so I'm not Orthodox, right? I'm a Protestant. So when it comes to Orthodox stuff, I don't have too much knowledge on it, so that would not be on me. So, but I could still ask a bunch of stuff about it, or offer my views. So I don't know too much about what's the Orthodox view on the Eastern Orthodox view on this sort of topic. But actually, are you aware of this? What's is the, let's say, if there is one, the official view of Orthodoxy on providence? Is it similar to Molinism in a sense, or to Arminianism, or is it?
it would be similar to like a form of Arminianism. Like it's not, it's the furthest away from Calvinist as possible.
That's good. That's good. But there is no mention of something like middle knowledge, right? That God knows what they would freely do, so counterfactuals, and then based on this, because
I'm
that.
actually not too sure. The way, like, I remember asking Father William once about this, and what he said is that like God exists outside of space and time, so it's like to some degree he is present when you're making the decision.
Okay.
But like he already is present before he even makes the world. It's like a complicated thing.
And the idea that he's outside of space and time, is that an official doctrine of the Orthodox Church, or is it possible for somebody to have other views? For example, Craig has the view that he was outside of space and time, but after he created time, well, now he's temporal, let's say, or maybe
I'm
some.
not too sure on the canonical status of this view, but it's like a view that like people hold in the church.
Okay, get it. Because, for example, God knows the future, the present, let's say.
Yeah.
So he knows that I talk to you now, but he didn't know that before, and he will stop knowing that at some point in the future, right?
Yeah.
So he has some kind of knowledge, then he loses it, and then he obtains some other knowledge that, oh, I do not talk to you, right?
Yeah.
So it seems that of course, it seems that he changes his properties, and then this is against the classical view of unchangedness, but it also seems to imply something about time, right? But that doesn't mean that, of course, that all depends on what time is, right? If you take time to be a property of space, like they do in special relativity or whatever, it wouldn't be the same with God being inside space and being affected by time, similarly to random physical objects. But it could still be that his belief changes because he can perceive time or whatever, right? And then there are other views of what time is. Maybe it's not physical. Maybe it's something broader. You can have views about time from an idealist sort of view, right?
Like
It's
Kant. Like Kant believed like time was like exist in the mind, not like a property out there.
right. So, and if that's the case, then God's relation to time may work a bit differently, right?
Yeah.
So whether God is outside of time or not, that kind of depends on what time is, right?
And then this is like a completely new rabbit hole. It's like you have to do like philosophy of time just
Right.
to answer this question.
To figure out, oh, is time temporal or atemporal? There's the A theory, B theory.
Yep.
Once you figure out what time is, then it's a bit easier. But figuring out that, I think that depends on some kind of broader metaphysics. So you kind of have to deal with stuff like, oh, is it substance dualism? Is it idealism? Right? This sort of stuff. But ultimately,
And also have like this weird view, like the Hobbes had, that like everything's material except for God.
oh, did he have that view?
I mean, allegedly, like I read that like in the textbook somewhere.
Yeah, I think I've heard that too. But then, what about angels and this sort of stuff?
At that point, I don't know.
Right. Because that doesn't seem.
That seems problematic for like reasons.
Yeah. Because of course you could say maybe they're material, but we don't observe them, like some weird thing like that, right? But it seems a bit strange to me.
I mean, it could be that they're like material in the same sense that like atoms are material, but we don't really directly see them.
Right.
But then like, yeah, I don't know how like someone would, or like air, how air is material, but you don't observe it.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess that would be a better analogy than atoms.
Some pre-Socratics, I think they talked about air being some separate special thing, right?
Yeah.
But actually, a problem that I have with Christian materialism.
What?
So the idea that Christianity is true, but let's say the minds of humans are exclusively material, and that's even less extreme than this view of Hobbes, which says that everything is material, if he say that, right? So how would resurrection work? And I'm talking about basically personal identity and resurrection. So let's say that somebody not just dies and then they get resurrected 2 days later, because under materialism you could say, well, their brain is still there, God will restore it a little bit, so they get their personal identity back. But let's say somebody's body completely vanishes because I don't know, thousands of years pass, or
They were like born, like
explosion. What?
I was gonna say, or like they were cremated.
Cremated, all kinds of possibilities, right? What happens then if God recreates their brain, right? How would that be different from just creating a copy of that person, creating a clone of that person, right? You can have somebody could create, God certainly could create a clone of me, right? And he could stand right in front of me, or he could go to New York and buy a sandwich, right? I'm not experiencing what he's experiencing, right? He's doing separate stuff. I mean, oh, but we have similar material properties. Yeah, but so what? We are still separate persons, right?
Yep.
So if it's Christian materialism, you kind of have to explain resurrection, both in terms of that, so the sort of general resurrection, but then in terms of being in the new earth, because then you get a new body and all of that, right? But if you have, let's say, at least substance dualism, of course, you can also have idealism. It works both ways. But if personal identity, rather than depending on the brain, which is completely material, it depends on something immaterial, then even if the person dies, this immaterial substance, set of properties, whatever it is, right, it could remain. The personal identity remains there. And then even if God recreates a body, he just attaches that body to the same mind, immaterial mind, right? And then the person continues to live, right? But that doesn't really happen easily on materialism. And there are a bunch of models for materialist models for the resurrection, but I think they're all problematic. We can talk about this in
a future episode.
In a future episode, yeah, because I've written my bachelor's thesis on this, so I have a bunch of stuff there. But yeah,
I was gonna say this reminds me of like a Bionicle storyline in like 2007, where like this one guy like is underwater, like the air bubble he uses to breathe like pops, so the mask of life transforms him into this other guy, a clone of this other guy who died a long time ago. So then like he has like memories of that guy, but since he's like a distinct person, he has like this existential crisis and he just goes insane, just wanting to like lock up every criminal.
Oh, so he is a different person but has the memories of the other guy. Okay, yeah.
Like, but he has like no memories of his former life as well, though. Like,
right. Okay, I thought when you mentioned Bionicles, I thought you were gonna start BSing like, but no, this is actually related. I thought you were just gonna see random stuff.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Oh, that's fair.
The one question I have is, when you said that like God has like knowledge of the present, and then like once that changes, he gets like knowledge of like the future. Once the future happens, something along those lines.
Yeah, it's still knowledge of the present, but the present is separate. It's different.
Okay, so is it like experience of like he has like recollections of like the present that's not the past, but experiences the present?
So here's the thing. It's not just an experience in the sense of perception. It's also a belief about what the present is, right? And it's this belief that he stops having, and then he obtains another belief.
Yes.
So let's say there's a McDonald's now, right? So he does believe that there is a McDonald's there. But then let's say, it closes, it turns into something else. He no longer believes there is a McDonald's there.
Yeah.
So his belief changed. So, and that's an internal change in God. Not a change of his essence, but it's still a change of some of his properties, like accidental properties, right? And I would say, yeah, his knowledge too. Now, what knowledge is, whether it's, let's say, warranted belief, right? In the way Platinger defines it, it's whatever you add to belief to become knowledge, whether that's justified plus something else, or whether it has truth or whatever, doesn't matter, right? Just knowledge itself, right? If he had knowledge, then he doesn't. And that's fine. He's still omniscient because he knows all that can be known, but what you can know actually changes. When that McDonald's closed down, you can't actually know that McDonald's is still there because it's no longer there, right?
I feel like this also kind of ties into like philosophy of language and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely epistemology, to some extent metaphysics, maybe. Because about the correspondence.
That's what I had in mind when I said philosophy of like language.
Right. It's a bunch of stuff. They're all kind of related.
Yeah, you affect one thing in philosophy, you affect like all of the other stuff over there.
Right.
It's kind of like Jenga. Have you ever played that game? I think it's Jenga.
Okay, you drag this and the whole thing falls down.
Yeah, it's like basically kind of like that. Like you try to like take one piece off, but then like everything else gets affected.
Right. It's kind of like basic beliefs or properly basic beliefs or whatever. You can base a bunch of stuff on them, right? But if the first belief is false, then maybe a bunch of the other stuff would be false. It doesn't mean it falls down; it's still there, but it's false, right?
It's probably more like like not as stable. Like
right, like a weird tower that has garbage, like making a Jenga thing out of I don't know, like trash or something.
No, I think it's more like that. It's just not as stable as it used to be.
Right.
It's kind of when like some like when you're playing Jenga as a kid, and some like guy takes off like two sides and just saves the middle one, and then like the rest it's like somewhat fine.
Right. But and to go back to what we were saying earlier about resurrection, right? So since resurrection is a doctrine of Christianity, right? There will be a resurrection, and then there will also be this afterlife in the new earth. Christian materialism, that doesn't seem like an option. Yeah. So then should we wrap this up, or is there?
Yeah,
should we say
we should wrap this up?
All right. You did record it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So click end. Did you?
Yeah, no, I did. I'm just like laughing just in case, because I see it says.
Oh yeah, no, that's the recording. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like imagine like well, I didn't record any of this. It's just like yeah. Anyways, probably we should wrap this up.
Should we conclude in a weird way, like say that?
I'll let you do the conclusion.
Okay, so that was the first episode Normally, I think episodes are gonna be a little bit longer, maybe sometimes not that long, but and we'll talk about all
Probably
kinds of stuff.
also semi-scripted, like not like
Right.
not completely scripted, but like you're not having public speaking. You have like at least an outline.
Yeah, we could prepare a topic, let's say, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Not like we're doing a speech where I talk for 10 minutes and you talk for 10 minutes. That seems kind of BS, but yeah, we will fresh our memory about a bunch of stuff, think about a bunch of stuff, and then kind of talk about it on the show. But I think this one was good. I think this was good. Like whether there was an awkward pause for, I don't know, 7 seconds or in the middle, who cares, right? Who gives a, it doesn't matter that much, right?
Yeah.
So, so that was the first episode. Hope you liked it. Like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff, right? And you can find us also on the Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Podcast, probably Spotify.
There's a YouTube topic of the.
There should be one.
Should be one, yeah. But but watch us on YouTube too, because there's video and we share our screen, right? There's text there, right?
Also put in the description like the sources we used and like links to like websites. So
that's pretty good. And we will do more stuff having to do with philosophy, theology, biblical studies. So hope you like that stuff, and see you next time. I don't know when, maybe next week. Right.
See y'all.
It's still recording, right?